Je donne maintenant la parole
I now give the floor to Her Excellency Kandia Kamissoko Kamara, Minister of State, Minister for Foreign Affairs, African Integration, and the Diaspora of Côte d'Ivoire.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Excellency, Mr. Abdullah Shahid, President of the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, heads of state and government, Your Excellency, Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, distinguished delegates, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. President, at the outset, on behalf of the President of the Republic, His Excellency Mr. Alassane Ouattara, who was unable to attend in person and whom I have the honor to represent, I would like to extend my warm congratulations on your brilliant election as the President of the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly. I wish you resounding success in the accomplishment of the difficult but exhilarating mission which has just been entrusted to you. I also thank the outgoing President, His Excellency Mr. Volkan Bozkır, for his outstanding leadership of the work of the past session in a difficult context marked by the persistence of the COVID-19 pandemic. Finally, allow me to warmly congratulate His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres on his brilliant and well-deserved re-election as the head of our common organization. I salute both his leadership as well as his constant commitment to the promotion of international peace and security, human rights, and sustainable development throughout the world. Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, since the COVID-19 pandemic broke out in 2019, it has profoundly disrupted our way of life and exacerbated the multiple vulnerabilities our world already faces. Thus, the theme of the 76th session of the General Assembly, namely building resilience through hope to recover from COVID-19, rebuild sustainably, respond to the needs of the planet, respect the rights of people, and revitalize the United Nations, is a call to act collectively to translate the ideals of peace and shared prosperity, the ideals of solidarity, which presided over the creation of the United Nations, into concrete action, thus emphasizing the inevitability of multilateralism. Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, despite the ongoing efforts of our states, the entire international community, and the scientific world to contain the COVID-19 pandemic, this health crisis continues. It is, moreover, taking on worrying proportions with the emergence of new variants, just as deadly as the previous ones and even more contagious. These new variants pose a real challenge to the implementation of response plans, both globally and in developing countries. It is undeniable that at this point in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic, vaccines offer real hope. We must, therefore, step up national initiatives and further strengthen collective action through cooperation and pooling of our resources, as well as guarantee equitable access to the various vaccines to all. This requires adequate funding for current initiatives, the suspension of patents, and the development of production capacities for these vaccines, particularly on the African continent, which has hitherto been insufficiently served. In this regard, I'm pleased to welcome the establishment of the UN Strategic Preparedness and Intervention Plan aimed at responding to immediate health needs, as well as the COVAX mechanism, the Global Humanitarian Response Plan, the COVID-19 Response and Recovery Fund, as well as the AVAT African Union Initiative. However, these mechanisms can only be made operational and achieve the desired results in a climate of peace, security, and stability. This is why, faced a persistence of certain hotbeds of conflict in the world, and in particular in Africa, something that undermines the efforts of our states to fight the COVID-19 pandemic, Côte d'Ivoire would like to reiterate its support for the appeal launched by the UN Secretary General in March 2020 for the cessation of hostilities throughout the world. In Côte d'Ivoire, we are resolutely pursuing the implementation of our response plan, which includes a health and humanitarian component as well as an economic component, namely one involving large-scale support to the private sector with a view to preserving jobs and curbing the social impact of the health crisis. Likewise, my country has, since February 15th, 2021, been undertaking a broad vaccination campaign against COVID-19 with the support of our bilateral and multilateral partners. As of September 15th, 2021, more than 1,500,000 people have been vaccinated. Our goal is to achieve, by the end of December 2021, immunization coverage of 60% of the population over 18 years of age through maintaining a daily pace of administering at least 20 to 30,000 doses of the vaccine. Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, faced with the scale of the collateral and adverse effects of this pandemic, in particular its unprecedented economic, social, and humanitarian impacts, which are potential sources of instability for our states, the consolidation of peace and the strengthening of social cohesion remain more than ever at the heart of our government's priorities. Additionally, after having overcome the socio-political upheavals it has experienced in recent years, Côte d'Ivoire remains, at all political and social levels, resolutely committed to a virtuous and irreversible process of national reconciliation and social cohesion. Our commitment to consolidating the work of national reconciliation has never wavered, despite the multifaceted and complex challenges on the path to its implementation. And this because we are convinced that our ambition to once again make Côte d'Ivoire an emerging power, one that is united in its cultural, political, democratic diversity and open to the world, depends on this. That is why the Ivorian government continues to work with all the forces of the nation to further strengthen the current dynamic of national reconciliation, for which no sacrifice is too great. With a view to this, the President of the Republic, His Excellency Mr. Alassane Ouattara, met with his predecessors, Mr. Henri Konan Bédier, on November 11, 2020, and Mr. Laurent Gbagbo on July 27, 2021. The outcome of these meetings was an agreement on the need to maintain dialogue and combine efforts to promote national reconciliation, which is an essential condition for the preservation of lasting peace and stability in Côte d'Ivoire. This is a prerequisite for any harmonious and sustainable development process in the interest of our populations. These meetings, which will be followed by several others in order to restore trust between all political stakeholders, are the extension of a series of audacious measures that the President of the Republic has undertaken in order to continue and strengthen the process of establishing a peaceful socio-political environment initiated in 2011. At the institutional level, this involves in particular the creation of a ministry specially dedicated to national reconciliation, a Chamber of Kings and Traditional Chiefs, which is responsible for initiating mediation missions for the prevention and management of crises and conflicts, a Senate, whose role is to dynamically anchor our democracy. And these measures also include, at the operational level, compensation for victims of the post-electoral crisis of 2010-2011, the large-scale return of refugees, including high-ranking political figures, and pursuit of an inclusive political dialogue with the opposition and civil society, which made it possible to organize inclusive and peaceful legislative and senatorial elections, and finally pardons for those convicted of acts of violence committed during the presidential election of October 31st, 2020. The national reconciliation process, which contributes to the consolidation of the rule of law in Côte d'Ivoire and its irreversible progress towards emergence, will continue to be based on an independent judiciary system and unwavering commitment at the highest level of the government, as well as strong national ownership. Côte d'Ivoire knows that in this process, it can count on the multifaceted support of the United Nations and the entire international community. Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, if we want to succeed in the decade of action to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals for the benefit of our populations, it is imperative that we redouble our efforts to reduce poverty, conserve our environment, and create conditions conducive to mobilizing financing for development. In the context of improving the well-being of populations, the issues of health, education, and social inequality require sustained attention on our part. We therefore need to promote resilient health systems that allow to ensure both universal health coverage and better preparedness to face future threats, in accordance with the commitments made in the political declaration adopted on September 23, 2019, at the outcome of the UN high-level meeting on universal health coverage. The health sector, therefore, remains one of the priorities of the government of Côte d'Ivoire, which has devoted a significant portion of the national budget to that sector over the past 10 years. Under this chapter, we have launched an ambitious universal health coverage program in order to guarantee all populations living on Ivorian territory access to quality and low-cost health care and services. This universal health coverage, whose advent has been a relief to our populations, has been operational since January 1st, 2021. Along with health, education is one of the sectors that has been hard hit by COVID-19. Indeed, this pandemic has accentuated inequalities and disparities within and between states, something that has consequently undermined the achievement of the objective ensuring education and training for all. In this regard, we believe it is urgent to act as a priority to strengthen the resilience of the education system by improving equity, inclusion, and digital connectivity. The government of Côte d'Ivoire, which since 2015 has made school free and compulsory for all children aged from 6 to 16, will spare no effort to achieve the goal of a 100% school enrollment rate. In addition to health and education, promoting the well-being of populations is at the heart of our concerns. The implementation of the 2030 Agenda of the United Nations, which has been set back by the health crisis, should also contribute to this. The Decade of Action launched by the Secretary General of the United Nations is therefore an urgent invitation to step up our efforts in the fight against poverty. For its part, Côte d'Ivoire has strengthened its national strategy with a view to gradually building a social protection system to benefit the most vulnerable populations, in particular through the establishment of a direct cash transfer program. Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the COVID-19 pandemic, which has amplified our vulnerabilities, has made us aware of the need to take vigorous action to restore the balance of biodiversity and ensure the sustainability of our planet. This requires that we all respect our commitments and adopt new management, production, and consumption models that are more environmentally conscious. That is why my country has acceded to the main international legal instruments in this area and has engaged in developing sectoral management strategies to ensure the preservation of natural resources. As signatory to the Paris Agreement, Côte d'Ivoire is working to reduce its CO2 emissions by 28% by 2030 and to increase the share of renewable energies in its energy mix to 42%. As part of promoting sustainable solutions to environmental challenges, my country has taken measures to mitigate and adapt to climate change in the areas of agriculture, integrated coastal management, renewable energies, and the modernization and resilience of road transport, which is a major CO2 emitter. Here, we would like to thank our bilateral and multilateral partners who have supported us in our desire to build a safe and healthy environment for ourselves and for future generations. This is why Côte d'Ivoire also expresses the hope that the upcoming fora of COP15 and COP26, which will be held in Côte d'Ivoire and Scotland respectively, will offer excellent opportunities to renew our collective commitments and to propose concrete and urgent actions to save our planet. Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the financing of the Sustainable Development Goals remains a major concern for our countries. Today, more than ever, the ability of our states to mobilize the resources necessary to finance the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the African Union Agenda 2063 is strongly affected by various health, socioeconomic, technological, and environmental factors. Indeed, the global growth crisis, which is linked in particular to the economic impact of COVID-19, the debt burden, and the lack of liquidity, is drastically limiting our fiscal space. Given this situation, it is imperative that we conceive new strategies for mobilizing sustainable financing, both internally and externally, in accordance with the Addis Ababa Program of Action, in order to invest in socioeconomic infrastructure and fight more effectively against poverty, precarity, and inequality. In this regard, we invite the private sector to invest more in financing sustainable solutions. In connection with this, I would like to welcome the various initiatives already carried out in this area. In particular, the G20 initiative to approve a final extension to the debt service suspension initiative until the end of 2021 in order to allow recipient countries to mobilize more resources to address the health crisis and its collateral effects. The historic decision taken by the International Monetary Fund to allocate $650 billion in special drawing rights to member countries, in accordance with the commitments made at the Paris Summit on the financing of African economies on May 18, 2021. and the organization in Abidjan on July 15, 2021, of a meeting to advocate for the 20th replenishment of resources of the International Development Association, IDA 20, which made it possible to discuss common challenges, particularly in terms of improving human capital, job creation, and economic recovery. I take the opportunity offered to me by this forum to thank all of our partners, both bilateral and multilateral, all stakeholders in these initiatives, which moreover support my country in the implementation of its National Development Plan 2021-2025, whose objective is to usher in a structural transformation of the country's economy. I would like, however, to reiterate our plea in favor of increasing official development assistance, debt cancellation, and the promotion of innovative financing in support of national efforts to mobilize resources to build a more secure and resilient world together. Yet we cannot build this resilient and stable world without tackling the grave transnational threats to peace and security posed by terrorism, violent extremism, organized crime, and cybercrime. That is why I would like to make an urgent appeal from this rostrum for increased mobilization in the face of the danger posed by the terrorist threat to our countries, especially the poorest among us. In addition to these threats, internal and regional conflicts persist in several parts of our planet, and the international community must continue to be attentive to the situations in the Middle East, in Afghanistan, and Western Sahara. Regarding the question of Western Sahara, Côte d'Ivoire would like to affirm its support for the negotiation process under the auspices of the United Nations by calling on the parties to show a willingness to compromise in order to settle this dispute, and this within the framework of relevant Security Council resolutions and in the spirit of the Moroccan Autonomy Initiative. Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, today the multifaceted and complex security challenges in certain regions of the world have been further amplified by the COVID-19 pandemic. This is the case in the West African and Sahel sub-region, where since the start of the health crisis, we have seen an uptick in ever more deadly terrorist attacks. In Côte d'Ivoire, since the beginning of this year, at least 5 attacks have taken place, claiming numerous victims. Fortunately, several other terrorist attacks were thwarted thanks to the vigilance and courage of our defense and security forces. These threats to the peace and stability of our states require, because of their cross-border nature, intensified sub-regional, regional, and international cooperation. The effective implementation of priorities set out in the Global Counterterrorism Strategy and the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime would be a decisive step forward from this point of view. In this regard, my country on June 3rd, 2021, signed a Memorandum of Understanding with the United Nations Office of Counterterrorism as part of the CT travel program, which seeks to prevent and detect terrorist crimes and other serious crimes through the use of advanced passenger information and passenger records. Likewise, in partnership with France, an international counterterrorism academy has just been established in Jacquesville in the south of our country with the ambition of contributing to ultimately creating a community and a culture of fighting terrorism in Africa. Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, during the celebration of the 75th anniversary of the United Nations last year, we solemnly made 12 pledges in order to build the future we want for the United Nations. The implementation of these commitments cannot be delayed, given the ongoing COVID-19 health crisis and its many harmful effects. That is why I would like to reaffirm to this august assembly my country's attachment to the values of multilateralism, which remains the approach par excellence in our common search for solutions to contemporary global challenges and issues. We must therefore promote an inclusive multilateralism, united through strong partnerships, which reaffirm the central and unifying role of the United Nations. This implies a bold reform of our common organization, which we seek to make stronger, more democratic, and more proactive, so that it may attain the noble objectives assigned to it. Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Côte d'Ivoire reiterates its commitment to the necessary reform of the Security Council in order for it to adapt to the realities of the world in view of the profound geopolitical and economic changes that have taken place in recent decades. My country reaffirms its full support for the African Common Position expressed in the Ezoini Consensus and the Search Declaration, which call for redressing the historic injustice done to Africa and for an egalitarian reform of the UN Security Council. Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Côte d'Ivoire remains optimistic about our ability to overcome our current differences in order to create a new Security Council architecture and to further pull our efforts in the service of the maintenance of international peace and security, the protection of human rights, and the promotion of sustainable economic development for the benefit of all. Thank you for your kind attention.
I thank the Minister of State, Minister for Foreign Affairs, African Integration and the Diaspora of Côte d'Ivoire for her statement.